I think that we do need a federal bill. Something I want to look at, like the States Reform Act by Nancy Mace. That's the Republican bill but there's something I want to point out. As much as a fan as I am of that bill for a lot of reasons, I think that there's a reason that a lot of politicians don't jump on it, because it's framing it as alcohol and tobacco. And that's just not politically palpable.
Because it removes it from the Controlled Substances Act. It deschedules.
It does, but it still puts it under the purview. It would put it under the purview of the ATF. So it would be regulated just like alcohol and tobacco and firearms, which means it's also subject potentially to a sin tax. But the other issue that I think that you have around that, while it can make sense, I just don't know. I don't know in this political environment, when you have MAHA and and this whole movement of getting healthy, how framing a new vice on the scene. Don't worry, it's a less healthy vice, but we're alcohol and tobacco 2.0. I don't know how you're going to win over the public with that message, because you're saying, yes, this is alcohol and tobacco because it's going to get regulated like alcohol and tobacco. So people are immediately going to put in their minds that alcohol and tobacco are going to be highly invested in basically controlling it. And it's going to be alcohol and tobacco 2.0. And so then it's going to elicit that negative connotation of these industries have a history of lying to us. They have a history of putting profits over people. They have a history of misrepresenting claims. They have a history of misrepresenting health claims specifically. And so I think that you're kind of putting yourself up actually for a losing battle, because you're going to have not just prohibitionists fight you. You're going to have inside industry fight you, because they're going to say, don't put us with this. Don't anchor us to this messaging. And so I think that as much as I think that we're on the right track with states reform, and I'm a big fan of Nancy Mace, love that she champions us, but I think that we need to go a little bit further and put the people first. Put the people first in the mind of the legislation. I think what you have to do is you have to reframe cannabis. You have to redefine what cannabis is based on its scientific understanding. It comes from Cannabis L sativa. It's all the same plant. There's type 1, type 2, type 3. That is based on the cannabinoids, the ratio of the cannabinoids of THC to CBD. This does cover essentially psychoactivity to non-psychoactivity. You can regulate and even add restrictions according to those types. You can put in this regulation that states could opt out for the wellness use if they wanted to, but good luck. Again, if you're framing it as wellness, you have so much difference. And then you say, but you can't take away medical. You have to have access for medical. And this is a wellness framing. And what you're paving the way for is actually a regulatory framework for a nutraceutical market that currently doesn't exist. The nutraceutical market of plant-based medicines and supplements and so forth is a multi-trillion-dollar market that has virtually no regulations, because the FDA doesn't know how to regulate it. And that's because of the FDA framework of single receptor modality, essentially. They look at how one molecule acts with one receptor in the body, and that's how they evaluate medicines. And so with plants, which are multi-agent pharmacology, multi-agents acting on multiple receptors, the framework that the FDA have is just inefficient. It's inadequate to actually be able to evaluate plants in a sufficient way. And so if we frame cannabis as the linchpin, so to speak, of nutraceuticals, plant-based medicines, we can actually introduce a complementary framework. I'm not talking about replacing it, but a complementary framework for the FDA to evaluate plant-based medicines and nutraceuticals. And we can have that in-between full wellness market when we're checking bioavailability, we're checking doses, we're checking how this works in with people. Imagine if we apply this into the plant-based world, in the plant-based medicine world, where we can actually evaluate it and we can actually get people to the medicines that they're looking for. We're talking about an entirely different healthcare paradigm in this country and maybe even the world. And I'm like, that's the story that cannabis has to offer. I think that is so much more inspiring, so much more exciting than framing it as new alcohol and tobacco and let's regulate it as such.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis-related podcast.